Good afternoon and welcome to another LinkedIn Live session with Luan and Laura. My name is Luan Wise. If we haven't met before, I am an independent marketing consultant working across a variety of sectors from higher education, manufacturers, law firms, household cleaning products, lots of different sector experience. And if I had a specialism in the marketing function, it would be B2B social media.
And I'm Laura. I'm a professor of marketing at Warwick Business School, and I am I teach marketing across all our undergraduate and postgraduate programs. I'm also the assistant dean at Warwick Business School for our postgraduate programs, but I'm passionate about bringing marketing to life in terms of bridging the gap between academia and practice, which is why Luan and I have collaborated and we run these sessions.
So our topic for today is there was a conference last week at the University of Huddersfield for 3 days, which I feel privileged to have had the opportunity to attend. And I wanted to tell Laura everything, not everything in 20 minutes, but lots of the things that I learned and took away from that session. But for those of you that don't know the Academy of Marketing, Laura, do you want to give a quick intro to what it is and what it's about?
We should also say I wasn't able to attend the conference. My son was quite poorly and ended up in hospital, which meant that I had to do mum duties rather than professor duties last week, which meant that I couldn't attend the Academy of Marketing conference, which was a great shame. Full disclosure, I'm on the executive for the Academy of Marketing, so I'm in charge of the education committee. So I have a lot of involvement with the Academy, and so Luan entered into my world and I wasn't there.
I know, I missed you.
To finally see each other in person, and I couldn't make it. So but the Academy is the Learned Society for Marketing Academia. It is an international learned society. And the conference really is about showcasing current research and pedagogic work that's going on across academia. So yeah, that's an overview of what the Academy of Marketing does.
Yeah. If anyone does have any questions, we're going to talk for about 20-25 minutes, but do put them in the chat because we can see them and pick those up. But yeah, despite you not being there, Laura, which was a huge shame, I loved it. I had the geekiest 3 days away from home. My first trip out from these four walls for kind of over 2 years, and just had the opportunity to sit in on those different talks. It was quite a challenge because, you know, things were running back to back. So you had to work out which sessions to attend, which series of talks to listen to. And just, you know, I deliver a lot of training as well, and just really appreciate the fact that having that time out from the day job and giving yourself space to think and absorb new information and the reflection time on it as well that you don't always get when everything's on Zoom was amazing. I learned some new words as well, and I had to write them down. Dramaturgy, I didn't know that was a word around theory and practice of dramatic composition. So that was a new one. And you know, this was about the methodology of people's research, and I hadn't heard of snowball sampling before and some other techniques. So yeah, I've added to my vocabulary as well as my knowledge. But I loved the fact that it was presenting these papers and just how it was all about peer-to-peer support and feedback, and in a positive style as well.
Yeah, so generally, when we have these academic conferences, people are presenting usually works in progress, so research projects that they have got some way through the project, but it's not kind of necessarily the finished piece. And it's generally used as a way of getting feedback from colleagues on your ideas. So you can present things in a very early stage, kind of literature review, conceptualization stage, or you can present your data, or indeed a full finished project. But we do use it as this opportunity to give and receive peer feedback. And the intention is that it's collaborative and it helps raise the bar, I guess, in terms of the research that then gets published and made into makes it into the journal articles. So there is a real collaborative feel to the way these conferences work.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I loved about it as well. And and I'll admit, I was really nervous going into those rooms, going, am I supposed to feed back, and am I able to feed back? I'm not a professor or a doctor. I was quite nervous as a practitioner, but I didn't speak in the first session, but then I found my voice for the rest of them, I can assure you. But I think one of the common threads that kind of came out of the feedback was the importance of clarifying definitions. There was quite a few kind of, I went to lots of different talks, but it was kind of, making sure that people kind of clarified what they meant by their topic or their area, so that, they only had 5-10 minutes to present the presentation, so it would have been in it, but just that was, making sure that people were really clear on what it was that they were researching and studying. And I guess the challenge of research is staying quite focused on that definition topic as well.
And not leaving things open to interpretation.
Yeah,
that's the key. So it means that just say, for example, if you're doing a piece of research, you make sure that you're very clearly measuring the thing that you're trying to measure or to show or to prove, for example. And just on that point, and this is where we go randomly off piece, as we always do, Luan, but I was not at the conference, but I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about this idea of trust. I know this is what we've talked about loads.
Yeah.
You can talk about definitions of what trust is, but it suddenly struck me. We talk about, we want consumers to be able to trust brands, but actually, what is it that consumers want to trust in a brand? What is it? And it's the focus of the trust. And I was like, oh, we need to work on the definitions around that. So even now, my brain's already thinking about being really clear and precise about what it is that we're talking about and what it is that we mean.
Yeah.
So we can have those conversations. So it is something that underpins a lot of the work that we as academics do.
Yeah. Just a question. Simon, great to see you in the chat. Simon, I sat in on his paper presentation last week, so thank you for watching this. Louise, if you have a look at the Academy of Marketing website, she's asking, is the conference open to all attendees? There are objectives of the Academy, aren't there? And attendees and members need to kind of meet those objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. But if anybody wants to find out more or talk about it a little bit more, as I said, I am on the exec for the Academy of Marketing, and you're welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to walk you through some more information about the work that the Academy does, because we're already doing some exciting work, but we've got some amazing plans for the future as well.
Yeah, Louise, knowing you as I do, I think you'd have loved it as well. I tried to make sure that over the 3 days I attended different sessions as well. So I went to talks about cancel culture, about the conceptualization of failure, which was a really interesting session, that we don't often talk about failure and what does that mean and how do we define it as well. I went to sessions about moral identity and social media, and there was a few sessions around kind of influencers, sustainable marketing, fashion marketing, but also a number of sessions around marketing practitioners and involving marketing practitioners in teaching as well. So yeah, really enjoyed those sessions.
Well, I mean, that's something I'm massively passionate about. So, I would have been straight in those sessions. I'm so disappointed to have missed the ones about the practitioner involvement, for sure. But yeah, I think on the sustainable marketing and fashion marketing, I'm really pleased to hear that those sessions were running, because they are sessions that are usually quite popular, but a lot of work from a lot of academics is happening in those areas at the moment. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, and it was nice when in some sessions, there was kind of 3 or 4 papers being presented, so you kind of got the theme of the conversation from different research angles as well. But I think for me, out of what if you were the key takeaways from it, I am a bit of a geek. I do like to read academic papers, and I know not every practitioner does that, and they're not the easiest reads. So you have to kind of zone in on this writing style, I think, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Some are easier to read than others.
Yeah.
But there's almost like a knack to it in some ways, to filter out what the key points are and the key takeaways from an academic paper are. But yeah, you do like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. But I think the reason I like it, apart from, you know, being geeky and, you know, finding out and always wanting to learn, is just that your world kind of just reinforces the fundamentals all the time. It kind of strips it back to what I studied 20 years ago, what I studied on industry calls since, and that, you know, as a practitioner, we can always get so distracted by the new shiny features that come out, or the new tools, or the new platforms that come out. But the research and going back to kind of being grounded in theory and getting the fundamentals right is what's at the core. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for me it's the combination of the why and the how.
Mm-hmm.
So you can teach tools,
Yeah.
you know, how to go and create a plan, or how to go and do some particular bits of analysis.
Yeah.
We can teach tactics and tools, but actually it's the why that's the important grounding. And it's that understanding the theory, the logic, and the rationale, which forms the foundation that then for me the how layers on top of.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's some students will turn around to me and say, oh, when am I ever going to use this theory in the real world?
Yeah.
But actually many people do go on to use a lot of the things that we teach, but it is that kind of that solid foundation of knowledge and understanding the why, so that you can layer the how on top, because the how changes really quickly, and we build on knowledge and the why, because it's such a solid foundation. I always like to think of it like building a house, like they're incremental bricks with the why, whereas the how can be completely different in 2 years time, and what you learned 2 years ago is now redundant, whereas with that solid foundation, it is generally, you know, solid, and it stays. So for me that's important.
Yeah. And that's why I think it was so important, and not to get distracted by, you know, should we be studying SEO techniques and this stuff, because, you know, it could change so quickly. But one thing I did in the breaks, because I did, and I was talking to your colleague that was there, was we were talking about, to get tactical, Facebook ad targeting, and how much that's changing right now, with criteria being removed, quite rightly, some of this around, you know, health issues, vaccination issues, but also a big set of criteria that's been removed is around charity and supporting charities. And I have a client that we do support a charity once a year, and we used to, you know, use the charity and associated charities as part of our Facebook ad targeting, but that's no longer an option. So I've been exploring Facebook ads and what comes up in my feed. And if you don't know, if you click the 3 dots, it comes up with, why am I seeing this ad? And I've been screenshotting them all and collecting them, because I do that kind of thing. And there's a lot of charities now that seem to be running sporting events to be sponsored, whether it's a walk or a jog. And when you look at the ad targeting, and I really don't know why I'm getting served this ad, apart from that I root around a lot, is being targeted at people that are interested in 5K and 10K and jogging. And that, thinking about how to target those ads and those campaigns, you need those background understanding of personas and profiling and interests and the fundamentals. If you just knew how to technically set up a Facebook ad, you're not going to have that kind of thinking process of, who am I going to reach? How am I going to reach them? What are they interested in? How's this going to really work? And I think for me, that's a great example of balancing the fundamentals with some tactics that change overnight.
Absolutely. And I think as well, when we talk about things like segmentation, targeting, and positioning, if you go down the why route, it's also about understanding the alternatives. So it's not necessarily always just about a demographic segmentation technique. There are lots of different ways that we can segment markets, and it's understanding that there not only are these different ways of doing it, but then when they may or may not be appropriate. But also, part of the skill of being a marketer, and a good marketer, is to use your own experiences as a customer when it's appropriate. So many marketers forget to think like a customer. But equally, 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with customers and you're not part of that target market. So you've also got to be able to think like different types of customers, or at least understand the data and understand, other demographic segments that you are not part of. So just to give you an example, if I say to students, I don't know, develop something for any target market, they will always pick students because it's what they know.
Yeah.
That's fine. But if you said to them, I want you to think about a very specific segment and design something for that segment. So if I said, I don't know, 60 to 70-year-olds in the UK, it gives them complete panic because they don't know. And that's part of the skill of being a marketer. So it's that why is not just about understanding the fact that there are different segmentation techniques and the reasons behind that, but it's also understanding that skill that underpins it, and then that's when you layer on the how, the tactic on top. For me, that's so important. And so I guess that for me as well, it's when I think as an educator, it's as myself as an educator, I always try and prioritize the theoretical, the knowledge and the understanding, but also the skill development piece as well is something that I'm really passionate about, because that for me is all part of the foundations too.
Yeah. And I think the other part, the whole premise of the conference and the way it works was about asking questions, not just kind of saying, this is what you should do, I would be doing, but it was about, have you thought about, have you considered? And, and that's what we do when we chat, not just on live, but is asking questions. And again, I think that's the skill of bridging the gap into the workplace, of asking all those questions and being curious. And what does this mean? And, what are we really trying to achieve, rather than, being so prescriptive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, academia is all about answering and asking questions, but it's also about how you respond to that feedback as well, which is which can be a skill that you have to learn. But yeah, I think that point you just made about staying curious and keeping learning is really important. And I think it's not just people, to kind of link it to the point we were just making, people can often think, oh, I need to know the latest SEO tactic or a piece of the how, but people don't often engage with the latest why thinking, and perhaps the latest research that's coming out, or the latest thoughts in terms of I don't know, questioning theories even. And that there are some people in the practitioner literature who do talk about things like that. Mark Whitson's one of them. He talks. Helen Edwards is another one, both Marketing Week columnists. They will draw on their academic backgrounds to talk about these things. But I think what you've experienced is quite unique, because you're starting to see the crossover between the two.
Yeah. But I think it's also about practicing that skill of questioning as well. And when I said I was nervous about going to the conference, it was almost like, you've got to get into that. If I'm going to be asked a question or my feedback, what are my thoughts on this? How would I feed back if someone asked me a question on this? And I think because practitioners are very busy day to day, getting stuff done, and especially now that we don't have that coffee shop time or the travel time to be pondering things, I think actually keeping that skill set of why, how, questioning, what does this mean, and seeing features and updates and going, does this apply to my business or my project? Should it apply? That's the bit that we need to carve out that time for.
Oh, absolutely. I could not agree more. And I was reflecting on what you were saying. I think I definitely, in this post-pandemic world that we're in, are we post-pandemic? I don't know. That reflection time, that thinking time, I'm definitely poorer in that sense, given the new ways of working that I am currently engaging with, and I don't think we're alone in that. And I think that's something that's really worth thinking about in terms of how do we perhaps help people to build in that thinking time and that thought provocation. and I also think that there's a lot there in terms of how do we open up conversations? How do we facilitate these conversations and that are meaningful for stakeholders?
Yeah, making sure that we have them. We've got a great question in the chat, and I'm not sure we can answer this today because then we'd never need to do one of these lives again. How do we bridge the how and why fundamentals better?
Come to Warwick Business School. No, I'm joking. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I don't say this glibly, this is genuinely something that I am constantly thinking about and working on, which is why we do sessions like this, which is why Luan and I are both passionate about not just talking to each other, but talking to practitioners and academics alike. And that's why this whole series is about bridging the gap between academia and industry. So there is not a short answer, because I don't think there ever will be, like, this is the way to do it. But I think it's definitely, my answer to that would be, this is definitely something that is a work in progress, and we're both dedicated to trying to figure out ways to do that. And we do invite other people to share their thoughts and comments and questions, and try and get a community of people perhaps who are trying to do the same thing.
I think the challenge is always going to be ongoing, isn't it? It is that point of continuous learning, and you know, my own challenge is, it's almost like the more you read and the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and then you're kind of in this cycle of wanting to know more and more.
But I think as well, from a practitioner point of view, or even an academic point of view, there's the learning you do individually, so the reading, the thinking you do on your own, but then as well, it's then how the conversations you have about those points and that learning that actually brings it to life a little bit, or gives the different perspectives and the different viewpoints. So you could sit on your own and read books or listen to podcasts or watch live sessions like this one, but then it's about the engaging in conversation that actually moves thinking forward. So I think it's a combination of both of those things that's so important, and that's where these conferences are absolutely invaluable.
And just going back to, you know, our new way of working, I think that's the part of learning that we're missing, because we may be jumping from kind of webinar, whether it's pre-recorded or live, to something else. Whereas, you know, as a couple of people are on here, I was able to go up to people afterwards and say, I really enjoyed your paper, and connect and continue the conversation. But when you watch something like we're doing now, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so, you know, on to the next thing, and not making that follow-up time to bring it to life and explore it even further.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't just spend our lives at conferences, of course,
no.
But although I wish we could. But yeah, I think there's a balance there, definitely. And yeah, I just picking up on your point around continuous learning. And I think one of the things that I would be keen to explore is not just this idea of bridging academia and practice, but also what we can learn from each other. So what can practitioners learn from academics, but what can academics learn from practitioners? And I think it needs to be that kind of two-way flow of conversation, information, ideas, inspiration, whatever. And I think I'm not 100% sure what all the barriers to that are. Time is sort of obvious. Time and working patterns are obvious ones, but I'm really passionate about figuring out how we can sort of break down some of those barriers.
Yeah, and I think just something that I gave as feedback to one of the sessions was, I don't think the bridging the gap conversations that we have are just between academia and industry. I think it's within industry as well. You know, throughout our careers, there's, you know, later career marketers, early career marketers, and there's gaps in between those as well, particularly when there's large teams and larger organizations. So it's not just kind of from graduation into practitioner world, it's all the way through your careers in the organization as well.
Absolutely. And that's where networks become really important, of course, but learning from each other, different fields, different industries, I think that's where sharing of best practice becomes really hugely important, whether that's, you know, from academic research or from practical examples. I think, yeah, huge value in that.
Yeah.
So which was your favorite presentation at the conference?
My favorite one, I'm not going to name any names of them. I think I have to give a shout out though that there was a graduate, someone that's about to graduate in the next week or so, that came and presented his dissertation research with his academic professor in the room. And, you know, fair play for, you know, in your final year going to an academic conference and presenting your research paper to the room. So I thought he was particularly outstanding. And, you know, it was just amazing. Standout presentations, I think the marketing practitioner ones, where, you know, it's obviously I could relate it, and I've seen kind of bits of both sides, and it just kind of made me realize, you know, we're doing this, Laura, and not everyone seems to have had the opportunity and the relationship that we have had to have these conversations all the time and work together and pick up the phone and have those conversations. So if we can encourage more of that between practitioners, find some academic people to contact, and vice versa. You know, I find it hugely valuable, and we just want to kind of champion it happening a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just need to think of different ways and different platforms and ways that we can make it meaningful, but also efficient, I think, as well. We're all time poor, so open to ideas if anybody's got any.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, I didn't answer your question. My favorite sessions, I think, were actually, one was about employability perspectives of content marketing and journalism. So that was a really interesting, again, the kind of bridging the gap, but what you're learning versus not learning, and some traditional skills. So there was lots packed into 3 days.
Great.
It is nearly past. We've been talking for over 25 minutes, so I think we'll wrap up for today. We will be back. Where are we? No, we're going to be back in September. We'll have a break in August, back in September, and there's some great conversations, so we will pick up on those in the chat. If there's topics that you would like us to talk about in the future, then do let us know. But otherwise, thank you for listening.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing your views with us, Luan, and for your experience of the conference. Again, I'm sorry I wasn't there, but hopefully we'll get to see each other in person at some point soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.